Good morning. Oh no, that was something different. Hello and welcome to the Ventuz webinar, which is about Substance Designer and the Substance Painter integration we have. I would like to welcome you and I hope you will enjoy this session. My name is Dennis and I'm gonna be your host for this day. So what we're gonna do today is a very simple thingy. I just modeled in a minute this simple hut, and we're gonna recreate this material, which is basically a wall with wooden planks. It is really just a basic thing. It's just about the technique you use and to in the end export this substance and use it in Ventuz, and the same goes for the tiling roof and stuff like that. So this is what we want to do today. Um, the scene, so you need the substance designer, which is this here, and this is the material we are creating in the end. So you need the substance designer. This one looks like chaos, but we can and will clean up this as well. We will reproduce this thing now, and it might take an hour until we have finished that. Because of the explanations I will give aside while we create this so-called substance. The idea is when using these substances that you want to change parameters on the fly in Ventuz. So when I go back to Ventuz and I select the substance which is responsible for the walls, let me block all the other useless stuff. So when we have a look at these walls, we have some parameters we can change. And as you see, I'm also using the height map actually to create these deformed mesh. Therefore, I have to use a highly tessellated model. This will kill some GPUs, maybe, especially when you have a huge scene. So as an info, this height map is, or called here displacement map in our engine, is disabled whenever you import a substance. So do not wonder and expect that the height of these meshes of the texture will be applied to the meshes. It will not until you enable this one here. So it is disabled by selecting it and hitting Control A. You're gonna enable it. Yeah, else it will bypass in the texture stages. The good thing is whenever you select a substance, you can see that I have exposed already 2 parameters. The rest are per default enabled whenever you export a substance, a so-called SBSAR file. These are the ones we're going to load here. And I have 2 parameters manually exposed, and the one is a scale, a so-called scale, and the other one is a scale noise. So whenever I change these parameters here, you're gonna see that we change in real time the behavior of the texture. So I'm gonna change now a scale for a kind of yeah, what it is called, let me have a look. This is a cloud or something like that, a cloud generator, and I'm changing the scale of this cloud generator with this property, and we have a noise applied. So whenever I change this noise, you can see that we have these details on the wall, if it's clay or whatever else, that we're gonna change this. What you need to know about is whenever you change these parameters in real time, the fact is that it will affect your rendering performance, since this texture has to be recalculated. Yeah, these are procedural parameters that are recalculated by the substance engine, which is running here inside of Ventuz in the background. So simple tasks like changing a color or the hue values may not affect the performance that much. These things may be adjusted in real time, while it's a bad idea to adjust such huge values, I would say, or yeah, huge parameters in real time. This is not a wise idea. So think about whenever you have a different engine like Unreal, Unity, or something like that, where you also can use Substance. The idea is that you basically create a level or a model or mesh or whatever else with a given substance. And whenever you're finished with that, you're gonna compile that thing and bake the lighting and environment on top and so on and so on. And then it's set. You barely change these values. So even if you're using a kind of, yeah, this thing starts to have more and more rust, and the rust is now covering more half of this whole object or something like that, even though they may have, it's my idea, they may have different kind of textures where they are blending through. I cannot think about that they are using these parameters in real time. So just to give an explanation how it should and would work with other engines, and I cannot imagine that they allow to have these changes in real time, else the engine will stuck for a millisecond or something like that, as you see here. Yes, the integration is very cool. It's very straightforward, because whenever you make use of the substance node inside of Ventuz, you have the loader or the material. The loader goes into the content area. You can manually bind all the texture outputs to the material, or you use the substance material straight ahead. Whenever you use the substance material straight ahead, I have created two substances inside of one. So I'm creating a new scene here and using the substance material here. And you get a warning like substance loader material nodes can cause render stalls. Please read the coding node documentation for more details. You can open the documentation here and get the same explanation. Black on white, like I gave you already, like this will stall whenever you change certain parameters and stuff like that. So you can then check here this box and say, do not show this message again. And whenever you create a new substance now or add it to the scene, it will not appear again. This warning will not appear again. As well as you should get infos inside of your messages, your log messages. There should be something like, hello, you were using substance materials. This may create a render stall. So this is just for us and for you as an information that you are using a substance material. And whenever we spot this message and the message log, and you tell us that your scene is not performant enough, it may be that you were using some animated property to change these values here, you know. So because you can still use the drag and drop function and bind all these values to something else, like it is common in Ventuz. So please keep that in mind, that changing certain parameters may affect the rendering performance. Anyway, I have now created a simple substance. I'm creating a rectangle to show off some stuff here, and an axis to scale stuff. Bring it up big like this, and disable the performance for now. So basically, we have now the graph selected primitives. So inside of this SBSIR file, which is just my primitives, SBSAR, I'm sorry, it contains two graphs. A graph is whenever you have used the designer, you can have inside of one SBS file different graphs. So the one is creating a wooden frame, a second one is creating windows, and so on and so on. And you would call this complete substance then house, for example. Yeah. So and you can then select explicitly on an object what kind of graph he would use for that surface or for this object or for whatever else. So in this case, we were using primitives. I have also a gradient graph inside. So I'm switching basically between two substances in one file. So we start with the primitives. And whenever you drag and drop a substance in here or use an SBSAR, the output size is per default set to 256 pixels. So this is the resolution you have for the complete texture that is outputted here. Then we have the random seed. We have a hue value which we can change. We have the saturation, luminosity, the tiling, the pattern you can select here, scaling, X and Y, and the angle, and so on and so on, and to quickly rotate the thing about 45 degrees. So these are the parameters. I'm starting from here. These are the parameters I set to be exposed and to be changeable from a user's side, yeah, from the end user in the end. So we have now selected the pattern square. I'm gonna change the scale now, and you see it is a simple texture which applies to the normal map and the base color. So whenever I'm rotating with the camera, you see that this rectangle has now a square applied as a simple diffuse, including the normal map in the end. So basically, whenever you have a close look, you're gonna spot that we have the normal applied here. The node graph, or the graph itself in Substance Designer, is very simple. On one hand, there are some things I've been adjusting to create a normal map and an ambient occlusion out of it. By the way, this reddish one here is the ambient occlusion. So whenever I change the value and the saturation, the luminosity, you're gonna see that we're gonna change the color. So, and we have other things like the tiling. We can change the tiling, and again, here's the scaling. And I have said that you have all these patterns available so that you can change through them. So you have these dots now on it, or spheres, or whatever else. And the interesting thing is we have still the possibility to use each individual output map and map that to something else. So, or assign it to something else. So you can use norm map somewhere else. You can use the ambient occlusion or the base color. The more complex these materials are, the more output maps you have created here. Keep in mind that whenever you are changing now this specific material, the input side here is file, the outputs may change as well. So the bindings may get lost. This is very important that you understand that, yeah, keep that in mind. So these are some things which you cannot predict. You don't know if the new material or the new bindings will match exactly that position and stuff like that. So like I said, the output size is now 256 pixels. You can increase that to 2K, and the final gets the resolution for these. This plays a big role whenever you're using bricks or some detail maps or something like that. Then you should change this resolution for here. Yeah. Basically, that's it about these input parameters you have for the substance, and that you have something to expose from the designer side. And I would say, let's start with this basic tutorial about creating such a substance. So let me close that one here, because we want to really create a complete new one. So basically, whenever you start the designer, you have this interface here, and what you're going to do is create a new simple substance graph. We say it's an empty one. You can rename everything, and we say the size mode is relative to the parent. So the parent will set now this resolution to 2K. This is for our actual project we are creating here. So I say OK, and we have brand new substance. So this one is an unsafe package, and here we have the first graph. So whenever you have a second graph, you create a thing where you can then select here where the graph is a secondary one, just as an explanation where you find that. So actually, this is how it looks like. It's empty, it's gray, and that's it. Yeah, okay. So what we're gonna create first is a base material. Why do I create a base material? Simply because of I can now use the right mouse button, drag and drop that onto this cube here, and you see a preview of the complete material. Right now we only have outputs here. Yeah, it's also a node-based system, so that's kind of funny and works good together. Whenever you have an idea about Ventuz, you should have a common workflow now here in the Substance Designer, by the way. So anyway, we have here these outputs, and these outputs can then be mapped to real outputs of Substance Designer. I will create now one output. and show you how it works. So we have here the base color, and I bind this base color by left click and drag and drop to this output node. This output node has the identifier to say output. We can have a description, but I'm gonna label this one now here as base color, and there you go. So this one is now named base color, as you see here. But this is not that it indicates automatically, yeah, the engine will automatically recognize that one as a base color. Right now it will recognize it as nothing because the usage is not set. What you need to set here is the usage. What is it? And we click on this plus icon and say, no, this is not a diffuse. We use that as a base color. And this will link in the Ventuz engine. So the substance engine will tell the Ventuz engine, this texture, this one here, 8-bit per channel, is handled as a base color. And it will connect then to the base color slot inside of Ventuz. You can define also the color space. That makes it easier for our developer who created the integration to identify this as a color space texture with set color space. There are situations where I had it when I didn't select the color space here, it got screwed up a bit, or it wasn't possible to separately map one RGB channel to a different one. I can't really remember where the issue was in the end, but it's sometimes a good idea to define the color space here like sRGB or linear. Sure, for a normal map, you should do this as well if it's a normal map channel, but sRGB and linear are the common ones that got screwed up sometimes, and that can save you internally in the engine time because it will handle these textures explicitly as they are. Usually it should work out of the box. So anyway, I've selected now the base color inside its components are RGBA. You can select something different, which is quite interesting if you want to remap color channels to something different. Yeah, just as an info. So we have the base color now here. We have a normal map, a roughness, a metallic, an ambient occlusion, and the height. The base material itself. Double click on that base material itself, and you can see some parameters which are quite interesting. Aside from the random seed, these are the standard exposed parameters, by the way, like the output size and the random seed. These are the common ones, which you can also disable whenever you set to export as well as BSAR. In the end, you can disable to say, okay, I don't want the user to allow to change the pixel size. I don't want to allow the user to have a different random seed used and apply to the whole graph. So you can categorize that one here. You can set the author, and what's more interesting is the instance parameters, because here you define the workflow. Whenever I create substances, I prefer to work with the metal roughness workflow. Our developer Tamu did a really great job by doing the substance integration, and whenever we are using these things, we have also created, therefore, finally, some new material stages, which are more like functions, and in this case, it's a texture components. And the texture components makes it possible to recreate the PBR workflow, like the metalness workflow, and match it for our engine. Since we are IBL, not PBR, we must find a way to show the materials as they were created, like for a PBR engine. And he made a great job by creating new nodes for the texture stages, like this texture components, and also we have some flags on the material itself later for the properties. I can show you that. This is more or less hidden for the substance material, by the way. So these are different. This is really a substance material. It is based on our standard material, which you see here, but it has its own settings, like, for example, the black diffuse. We need to have, and this is just for the shader workflow inside of our engine. We need to set the diffuse color to black and apply some other values and multiply that, and so on and so on and so on. And yeah, whenever you use these substances now, these SBSAR files, they are treated really correctly and they are showing up correctly, since Tammo did this conversion to, I would say, name it like this, so that all the components got distributed to the shaders in the correct way. So back to the designer. Yeah, this is, so I stay with the metal roughness workflow. That works great. If you would change that, it will use the specular glossiness, and therefore you have an output here which is called specular, and another one which is called glossiness. In the other workflow, the roughness workflow, you have the roughness map and a metallic map. So and what's quite more interesting, aside from the standard values you can change here, like the grunge, you can also just expose this grunge amount, and it applies grunge to the whole material. Yeah, so if you would export this one here right now and say, hey, hello, just expose this grunge amount value, you import the SBSAR and are able to have the simple material, this base material, with just a grunge amount, and create kind of like dirty surfaces on a metal block or something like that. Yeah, so just for info. But what's more of a use is the base color, normal, roughness, metallic, ambient occlusion, and height map. User-defined maps. These are inputs and appear on the left side. So on the right side, we have the outputs to distribute that to each separate output map here. But we want also to have our custom inputs like base color, a normal map, the roughness, the metallic, the ambient occlusion, and the height map. So it's like same in and output, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And we're going to start by creating simple things like, let's go with color. We have no uniform color. There it is. So it basically is basically the same thing like in Ventuz. You hit the space bar, bring up this menu, and type in uniform or color, and then you look for uniform color, which, like it says, creates a simple uniform color texture or color node with an output, and we bind that one now to the base color, to the roughness, to the metallic, and then we are set for now. You can simply click Control and D while we have this thing selected, and you duplicate the same node again, which makes use, which is really useful for now. So we bind that one to roughness. Oh, you see that one here? This is a quite nice feature you have when you change the settings for the Substance Designer. As you can see by these yellow and grayish dots here, this is what it expects to have as an input. If it's a colored one, it expects to have a colored input or sense and color texture output. In this case, this one is expecting a gray map, grayscale map, but I had a uniform color, which creates a colorized output map. So it automatically converts now this colorized map to a grayscale map. This is a setting you can set in the designer, so don't worry. You will find that on somewhere in the preferences and have here something like, is it a graph? Automatically displaying here also, yeah, here you see automatically insert color grayscale conversion node, and this is what happened here. Now it automatically create this small node in the front. This one drove me crazy when I was using tutorials to get into the Substance Design a long time ago, and I seen these things automatically appear there, and I didn't notice that, well, because the people just bound these things very quickly, but it didn't work for me. I couldn't use the output here on this height map, for example, and yeah, I had manually to use the convert, there you go, grayscale conversion node every here and there, and I was really like, this looks totally different to the one I see on the tutorial. So this is the trick here. Okay, we have now the roughness defined, we duplicate that one again, and we wanted to have that for the metallic and for the height map. But anyway, we're gonna create a height map anyway soon. So yes, the metalness. The metallic should stay black because we don't want to have a metallic look right now. This will be a non-metallic object, therefore we set this metallic map to black. The roughness, well, you can define this for now. So I click on this uniform color, change it to grayscale, and you see what happened. This is now obsolete, so I have to rebind that one. And I'm gonna say, okay, it's like, yeah, not really glossy, but also not really rough. So, and the base color should also be a grayscale for now. So, and I'm gonna set it to this one. So drag and drop that on here. We have the normal map, which we should use now, and create. So there you go. So whenever you double click on a node, you're gonna see that result in the 2D view. The same goes for the other uniform color and for the black one. Like I said, you can use right mouse button and drag and drop that material, the base material, onto the 3D model, and it will render then what this base material created right now. Yeah, so this is quite easy. Let me disable that. So whenever you disable the ambient occlusion, you're gonna see here the result. So here we go. So, and let me change the color for the roughness. So the whiter, the brighter the output is, the less glossy it is, the more rougher it is, and the more it is blackish. You see that this will create now here more glossiness. So let's stay for something like that. Okay, great. So let's create our first kind of pattern, and I'm gonna use their tile generator, like this one here. So, and as you see, it automatically sets now this one here to the active 2D view, and we're gonna change the tiling to something like, whoop, very straightforward, like this one here. This is great. So that works great out, and this will create the outer frame of our wood, this wooden outer frame. So this is what we're gonna use now, and we change some parameters, like it is not a brick, because the bricks create two soft edges here. So we're gonna change that to be square. So, and okay, now it's turning to white. Don't worry, we're gonna change the sizes, like little size, and have the interstice something like this. Just a second. So something like that. So that's the final result here, and the same goes for the Y. And now we are back to a basic frame like. So this is great. And whenever I hook up this one now to the normal map, so let's create a normal out of it. So selecting this, and I'm gonna select and drag and drop the output of the tile generator to the normal map. You see barely here something happen, and bind that one to the normal of that one. It is now here applied on my cube. We're gonna check the settings for the normal, and we're gonna boost up the intensity for the normal map to be 10. So this is a bit more. Okay, so okay, that's great. Then I would say we have to invert it later on, but I want to have more these, what we had were horizontal wooden planks as well, but we want to have them deeper behind that one here. So I will create another tiling generator. Tile generator. This one here, which has different settings. Makes sense. And these settings will be something like, we have 2 and 3 of the amount. 2 and 3. There we go. and change. What do we need to change is the center size 0.05 on both ends. So here we go, and also change the brick to be a square, something like that. So we will adjust the thickness of these guys later on. Now we can go for 0.88, something like around that. Anyway, we'll do that later. So we're gonna blend these both guys together using a blend function. And this is now automatically set to, because I selected this node and I create a new one, this will be automatically connected to each other, which is quite okay. So we're gonna use that as a back, and this one is the foreground. So, it's not intense enough. I don't know why. Anyway, I'm gonna change that. So, okay, we have that these both blend now over each other. The final result is this, because the opacity for the foreground is now set to high, and you see you can adjust by changing the opacity. You can change the strength of these blending. So, and what we're going to change now is, since I want to have these horizontal stripes to be behind that outer frame, I'm going to change the blend mode to, let's say, subtract, something like that. So yeah, and I have to invert one, and this should be this guy here. So correct to invert that. No, the other one, this one, invert grayscale. So since I selected the binding and created a new node, this will be inserted into this here, and then it creates that one here. And as you see, the subtract function is working quite good in creating a bit darker horizontal line, and here it is brighter because this is our frame which sits in the foreground. So we have to adjust just these tiling amount and settings here. Something, let me see how I did it in the other example. So we were changing that one to 0.5, and the vertical amount is 0.56. So that looks good. Interstice has been changed as well to 0.12. And this one is, if I remember correctly, 0. And the scaling is something like 0.994. So this creates a nice frame. So, okay, this is now uniform. Great one. We have to adjust a bit of these values to make them properly. And it should be the same. Where is the size? So pattern size 0.5, 0.56. So these both to 0.5, and it should be a bit lower scale. So 0.88 should work out. So let's see what the blending function looks like. Okay, that's closer. And what we're gonna do is now we bevel these guys. So to explain what I'm doing here is I'm creating now the basic shapes. I'll create the basic shapes for the wood frames. And the funny thing is, it's more or less like in Ventuz. Whenever you want to have something created, you really start with really the basic stuff. The real deal is to create shapes on your own, to create masks and stuff like that. So this is quite interesting, and it's quite funny to create all these materials on your own, because you have full control over that. That's really the big deal, I tell you. So well, let me check what we get here. We get here the front tiles, so we need to bevel them a bit, and I'm gonna put that in here. So it sits between the tile generator and this here, and the beveling is like round one. It should not be smooth, but the normal intensity is 10. That's great. And the distance should be a bit lower, so something like 0.2 should be fine. So that just has smooth borders here, just like 0.2. And the same we do for our background frames here. We bevel them as well. So you see it's way too much bevel. And the same here, like 0.03. That's fair enough. And if you look closer, you see this is the bevel we're creating now out of a standard shape. You see, it's not a blur, it's really a beveling that's happening to that. So blend looks like this. So I'm rebinding that now to my normal map, and the normal map looks like this now. See, we're getting closer. And it looks like you see that this frame part is now overlaid onto the frames or the wooden stuff behind. So we created our very first rough shape for our wood. That's a good thing, and these are just some nodes to understand. These are just some nodes that create this kind of shapes. We will go further on now, and we want to concentrate on these tiles here. These tiles should be like clay or something like that. So now we have to create the pattern for the clay as well. And we are just creating right now the normal map, and then go further and create the colors and mask out certain parts of these materials to colorize just the wood and colorize just the tiles, the inside of the tiles. So don't worry. We are going now for the clouds. The clouds are also procedural generated noisy textures. So this is fine, and we're gonna create pollen noise. And when we mix up these both things with a specific operator called the slope blur, and use this one as the grayscale base and this one as the slope, you can see what kind of texture we are creating here now. These are the funny glass effects from Photoshop at the end. And we have to adjust the parameters to match them. And by the way, this clouds is the scaling I changed and exposed the parameters from, if you remember what I've shown you. So, and I show you what happens with the slope blur grayscale if you adjust these values. We're going to bring up the samples to 32, and this creates this cellular pattern like, yeah, and it decreases the intensity a bit. The good thing is you always see the result of this whenever you double click it or have it selected. So this is a real cool thing. Yeah. So the pollen noise scale. So something like this. And you see this slight variations inside, and this is the thing we are after. We want to have on one side, we want to have on one hand, we want to have this cellular looking, and on the other hand, we want to have some small details on it. This is the combination then of these both things, but this will go on and on and on and on and create a really cool looking pattern with that. So what we need to do is now we need to blend this result with these kind of noise we have created here. So yeah, it's always like selecting and moving things aside. As you see, this whole node graph will grow and grow and grow. So we have a blend node because we want to blend both results. So this one goes into the background and this one goes into the foreground. You see just the foreground now again because the opacity is set to 100% just of the foreground. And there we're gonna use a different blending mode. We're gonna use the add. So let's just apply it to the normal map. You see the result here, but you see that applies also to the wood. So Don't worry, we're gonna change that soon and have the opacity a bit lower. So something like that. No, the other way around, sorry. I screwed it up. This one goes into the background and this one into the foreground. So something like that, because now I have more control over the opacity for the clay wall. So something like that, just small of it. And we have an opacity input here. This is like the mask we want to apply. And with this mask, we're going to select now where should the blending happen. And the best thing is then to use just some of these outputs here. You can decide to go for, let's say, this result. Yeah, we're going to use that here simply on. Okay, that didn't work out because we need to invert that mask, and we invert it by using an invert grayscale. It's not enough since this is grayish here, and there is a nice node that comes handy. It's the histogram scan. It's called histogram scan, and that selects basically the levels which should be used as masks. So where is the histogram? Here we have the histogram scan. Now I'm adjusting. Now just the position. So that's fine. So, and there we have a simple created mask. I'm going to pay attention at the details, and you see we don't want to have it applied also on the, onto this bevel border. So if this value is too low, it may affect already the bevel border, since this bevel border is also like a grayscale thingy. So you have to make it really like adjusting it like this. So it just should blend a bit here. So, and this created now a simple clayish looking tiles and a wooden frame on top. So far, so good. So let's clean up that stuff a bit. Something like that, because this is just creating tiles. And this is creating the clay. And the good thing is you can also sort out the stuff, or let's say, yeah, clean up the space and creating kind of families like you're commonly known by Ventuz. So by creating this frame part here, whenever you select this frame, you can move the whole thing. So select all the nodes, click on frame, and it creates frame. You can name this frame, and you can also say, yes, this title should or should not be visible. This is a good way to keep things clean and to have a better overview over all the stuff you see here. So this creates the very basic stuff. And as you have seen, by taking this opacity part here, you can make kind of masks or selections. This is very cool and very handy, to be honestly. So, but we want to do some more of details, and therefore we want to create a kind of like, let's say, wooden structure onto these frames, and we do so by using another generator which is called Crystal. Crystal 2 has this nice fiber style pattern. As you see, you have a lot of generators available, and these are very handy. And the thing is, what you're gonna do is blend and mix up the stuff until you achieve a certain look you like. You know, that's basically it. So we blend these both together again. We have the one in the foreground, the other one in the background. You decide to have the opacity here, and you see you get a bit of variation now. This is one way to do it. There are several ways to create the end result. What I like is to have these things now warped. So I'm going for a directional warp. I'm using the input, these here as an input. and use the crystal as, oops, so here we go, and the crystal pattern as the source for the warp, but this is not enough if you compare that. It just shifted a bit the stuff, so we will do a bit more fancy stuff, and therefore I would say we use a slope blur, which we did already. So this is not the grayscale, this is the slope, and this is the grayscale. The result is again like this, but it looks like droppy thingies. And then we have to adjust the slope grayscale values. That's all we need to do to achieve a better look. So the samples are very low, and the intensity as well. So you see, so something like that. And then I'm gonna using anisotropic noise. So this is like the fibers of a tree bark or of the wood itself, but we want to change the direction. Oops. So rotate true. So it goes from top to bottom. This is just an example, yeah. So the amount, something like this, no X amount. So just these stripes is fair enough. And now we're using that with a directional warp and adjust the power of them. This will go onto one direction only right now. So the intensity is high enough. No, it's okay. So, and we will use another warp in between. Say this is the input, and use this crystal as well to give it more distortion. So this looks more interesting then. Intensity is fair enough. Then use this as a warp. Yeah, that goes on now. So you see there's more distortion inside. So, and we can use this distortion now, blend it on top of our wood. So let me select these ones. Come on, go aside. Here we go. So we will blend this now onto these outputs of our frame. So we put blend in between here. Blend. Will it blend or will it not blend? So this goes into the background, and this goes into the foreground. So we're gonna use the multiply value. Whoop, whoop. You see, and again, we have the same issue like before. We have now this structure, this wooden structure also applied to our tiles. And as usual, we are using the opacity, the masking here on this one. And as you see, this is the wrong direction. So therefore, because the tiles have now this wooden pattern applied, we're gonna invert that one as well. And there you go. You have the wooden structure only on these woods. You could go further and more crazy by now creating more and more maps. And what you also can do is now, I'm gonna show you that is very, very easily. You use the same output here, but we would use, how it is called, a transformation, right? So transform, and just a second, it needs still to be there. And in the end, what you're going to do is, as you see here, you have the same things like in Photoshop. You would transform this image and rotate it by 90 degrees. Use that one only on the horizontal ones, and use the other output on the vertical ones. That would be the real deal. and then the complete textures are really up, looking correctly, like in these sections, which are also a bit lower than the one frame here above, will have horizontal structure applied, while this one will have the vertical structure applied. So just as an intro, this is the thing you could do, and where we could go crazy. So just to show you, all these things are possible here. Yeah. Okay. So this is okay for now, and we want to have now colors applied. So there's a good way. Right now we have just the uniform colors applied, and we gonna create now. Let me have a look. We're gonna create now the colors, and we use therefore a node called curvature smooth, but we have to get rid of the uniform color, because we will create the colors by a gradient. So I'm gonna use the curvature smooth node now, and the curvature smooth node gets its informations, its image from a normal. So this is a bit unique now what I'm doing here. So you have here now the curvature smooth. This is the end result. Yeah, this looks like an RGB image, but you don't have this bluish yellowish effect applied, which is quite nice. And then we use a gradient map. This is always the first node, by the way, that appears on the screen, because it's usually one of the most commonly used nodes in the designer, like the mover is in Ventuz. So, and now I'm gonna change this gradient, and I'm gonna show you something which is very good. Let me have a look. Where is my web grab? Here it is. I'm gonna look for wood. So something like this. Yeah. Put that designer a bit aside. These are really tricks I'm gonna show you now, by the way. So we select the gradient map, and we have the gradient editor here. I'm gonna select this gradient editor. It pops up here. And now I'm gonna choose this pick gradient. What I'm doing now is I'm selecting these colors. Say no, I'm not happy with the result. I'm selecting here this line, and it creates automatically a gradient out of the selected colors, where you move over with your gradient picker. This is such a cool feature to create instantly cool gradients. So, and if you have a cool reference picture, you could create really cool, easy gradients, by the way. So we have this gradient map now. I'm gonna apply this now to the base color. Et voila. We have now these colors onto that. Yes, you can decrease the amount of the intensity for normal map and so on, because they are way too strong. Anyway, this is just to show you how to do that. So, but the problem is, again, we have now the color applied to both, to the clays and to the wood parts, and we don't want to have this. What we're going to do now, right? We're going to use the blend function again. We put that one in the foreground. We use another gradient map. See, always is the first. I'm gonna use again the output from the curvature smooth. We have that one here now, grayish. I'm using the output now in the background. The result is as expected, like this. We're gonna leave this as default. We do not change the opacity or something like that. What we use is again the mask for the opacity. And there you go. So the wood is like yellowish, which is quite crap, and the clay is looking grayish. So you can use a different kind of gradient. Again, the gradient will look like something like that. So, or have a bit more of warmer colors inside, like that. So you can desaturate that whole thing. So the gradient editor is really real nice tool to go with. So and we go for gradient editor here as well. Let me have a look. I must have some better colors for that. Anyway, I have. I'm pretty sure. So we pick from there. Yeah. Well, I'm not happy with that. Okay. Something like that. And that's quite nice. So another thing which is really cool is about the roughness. The roughness, in my opinion, should also be different than just the same, like overall it's rough or roughish or something like that. So I really want to change that as well. I don't really like this. So my idea is to have the wood more reflective or more glossy than the tiles, and there is a very simple way to do so. You could, for example, also use kind of these structures from the wood, so the result of this one, and adjust the levels. That would be fair enough. Or you could just reuse these patterns, lower them in their values by using the levels, the node called levels, this one here, and adjust it overall. But I like to have a bit of variation, and therefore I'm using this blend output here. And what I'm going to do is now invert the grayscale, because I know this has to be done. Use that input here, yeah, and apply that to the roughness. And as you see here now, when we go in, you see that certain parts have more glossiness than others, while the tiles stay really solid. And another thing is, which we have forgotten, by the way, is to make use of the ambient occlusion. I'm gonna use the HBAO and put that, and that's not the ambient occlusion map. Just a second. We want to have the ambient occlusion. There it is. Oh, I connect to that. So yeah, we have now way more structure. Ambient occlusion is really the way to go. So we have now the invert grayscale here, and I put a scale or a level node. Sorry, a level node in between. Yeah, this one is live. It's not pre-recorded. Some mistakes may occur. So and I'm adjusting here now the levels you want to have to make things more glossy or something like that. You see? Yeah, I'm happy with this result now. That's quite nice. We could have done more, but I don't want to waste your time more and more. This should be just an introduction of how to do that. But anyway, what you got is a bit of gold. What we're gonna need to do now, if we are happy with everything, aside from saving and naming that properly, is we have to use all the outputs. In this case, you see it's orange and grayish because it doesn't know, it accepts both, like the RGB channels and the grayscale channels. And yeah, you go through and select here this output node, you define what kind of components this one is using, like here in this case a normal, then you duplicate that thing simply and bind it to the roughness, and here you say this is not a normal map, this is the roughness, and then you duplicate it again. You can also use another node and create it manually. Anyway, you say here this one is metal, and so on and so on and so on. Keep in mind, and this is very important, that you metallic, that you label them correctly. It makes it easier whenever you jump over to Ventuz, because then these output parts of Ventuz are then correctly named. Yeah, keep that in mind. So aside from this, when I double click now here in this empty space, yeah, you have inputs and output parameters. Here you go, input parameters. Here's outputs, and the outputs are now base color, and the rest is just named like output 1, 2, 3. So this naming will appear here as well. So whenever you want to have input parameters for your own created substances, this is very easy to do so. I did it for the other substance, for the finished substance, more or less. I did it for what did I do that? For the clouds, right? Good that you pointed that out. For the clouds, I did it, and I used this scale here. Because when I change the scale for the clouds, you see it changes here on my clay tiles. And to do so, to expose this value, this parameter here, you just need to click on that guy here. And there is the part where you can expose it. The name is then scale for now. That's okay. So we double click on the empty space again, and you see here we have an input parameter. Way. And the identifier is scale, and the label, and this is a label which appears in Ventuz, is now then, in this case, to make it correctly, scale clouds. And this will appear then in the Ventuz properties lists. So the same goes for the Pearl noise. I want to also expose now scale, but when I click expose, it will use the same input name. Please do so and select another one that appeared here. I don't know if it's made by intention or what's the reason for it. You can also give it a unique name, but you must make sure that you have a unique input name for that one, else it will hook on the other one, and then whenever you change one value, it will change both scalings at the same time. So, and we have a second one here, which is the scale integer one, and we label that one scale Berlin noise. So we have the Pearl noise correctly labeled now, and there you see Pearl noise. The cool thing is you can also adjust what's the default value, what's the minimum and the maximum value. Should I clamp it? What's the step size and so on. So this is really, really handy, and that's a good way to set ranges for the values you want to change. Yeah, it makes no sense to scale something down to 0.01, for example, while a natural number would be like between 2 and 6 times or something like that. Yeah, so that's quite cool to do. So good, so far, so fine. We're gonna save that one, and I'll label that now. What we say is tutorial 02 wood rolling tiles, something like that. So we save it, and this whole package is now saved SBS, not an SBS AR. That's important. You can rename that guy, this graph, and say this is wood clay, for example. Do whatever you want, right? I mean, you're free. So publish selected elements. It's the next thing you want to do, because this one will be saved then as SBS AR, which we can handle in Ventuz. Save it, and there it is. Parameters exposure, the output size, the random seed, and this is what I told you in the beginning. You can select per default always the output size and the random seed. If you have set that manually, the parent size, for example, Ventuz will import it with 2K. If you have the output size parameter exposed, it should start with 256 pixels. And like I said, it should, if you disable, use the 2K in this case. So yeah, you're gonna export it. There you go, finish. I'm gonna change, oh no, I started Photoshop, just a second. I'm gonna change now to Ventuz. Finally, woo. We can use the new and use the substance material, drag and drop that in here, The primitives are selected as usual. I'm selecting now tutorial 2 wood and rolling tiles. I'm using a rectangle, creating an axis, scale it up, voila. There is this material applied. That's what we did. You see the parameters here. When I click on the substance, the input parameters, we have the output size. I increase that to 4K. Hey, come on. It will take a while until it's compiled. Let's see if we have enough details there. Yes, that looks great. You have the scale clouds with letters. You have the scale per the noise. Way. There you go. What I don't have right now assigned is the height map. Therefore, it's ignored here in the shader. If I would apply the height map now, you would see that also selectable in the shader. The output map, height map, is not done here, and also the output for the ambient occlusion is not done, which gave us quite cool details. So let's do so. We have it here. It's not the metallic channel, it's basically the ambient occlusion, which is here. The rest is metallic, roughness, normal base. Great. I save it. I'm gonna re-export that one. Yes, I want to replace it. Yeah, do so. Going back into Ventuz. Let's see what happens. I'm reloading that one. And I'm gonna update. That didn't work out for now. Anyway, substance, material, drop that in here. Reload that one. Oh, do I have the correct one? Let me have a look. Webinar. Yeah. Ah, did I do that? Give it a different name. So just to be sure. So here we go. No. It's not using that one correctly. I've made a mistake, I'm pretty sure. That's on my side. Ambient occlusion. Output for. It has an ambient occlusion. It shows me the ambient occlusion. So this one is fine. Do we gonna blame Ventuz for that? I don't know. Let's see. That's cool. Substance tutorial. Oh, this guy won't handle now the height map. I don't know why. Anyway, this one did work out for that material here for the substance. As you see here, here's a displacement. I'm pretty sure it's my fault. I'm really pretty sure it's my fault. I don't want to blame Ventuz in this case. Yes, and that covers how to get a substance built in the Substance Designer, how easy it is to get it inside of Ventuz, aside from that small issue we have here now in the end. And exposing parameters from your procedural textures, from your substances to Ventuz, and that you can change them and make them interchangeable. We have also the interactive help, which is quite a lot of help for you, I think. It shows up also the substance material default stuff we have included with Ventuz, and I mapped that to different rectangles and stuff like that. You can change the tiling amounts and play around with these guys. It's not a big trick, as you see and have seen right now. So yeah, also the grayscale stuff here is very nice. Might be handy to have such a simple tile generator inside of Ventuz. That's the reason why we implemented that as default. And then I have created the substance interactive thing here. That one sits on a kind of V-box, having a rusty material. You can change the colors. And what I do here, by the way, just to explain you that, is really changing the hue value inside of the substance in real time. Just to show you that it must not affect always the performance by changing these values, because the calculation or the handling for changing a hue is not that intensive. So yeah, and I just did it between this reddish color to the greenish summer color. Aside from that, the particle system is then stopped when it's summer, so you won't see leaves falling down now anymore. These are just the rest ones from the winter times. So I used the slider in two different areas. The one is for the particle system and the other one is for the colorization. I hope that explains a lot for you how to get these things up and running with the Substance Designer. The Substance Painter, on the other hand, which is the real painter for painting on meshes and stuff like that, is also not a big deal. The good thing is that we finally can import and handle GLTF files, and that makes it way more easier by handling the textures. So in the end, you don't need to manually export and create materials and map all the textures to the correct slots and stuff like that. So this is handled way more easier right now. What I'm gonna do is now I'm creating a simple chamfered cube, which we're gonna texture. This is one of the things I'm doing in the tutorials or when I'm doing the trainings as well. Oh, sorry. So here we go. There we have a cube. We're gonna make it more chamfered. So something like that. So, oops. So here we go. I'm gonna export that one now to the webinars part. All this chamfer cube. But the bad thing about that workflow would be you need to have unique UV settings. Aside from that, when you use FBX export, doesn't matter what kind of version you are using, like if it's Cinema 4D or something like that, or Maya, or Modo, or whatever else, make sure you export with the version FBX 2013. This is the most compatible version actually from when it comes to the FBX parts. Okay, I'm gonna still export it that we have finally a mesh on the hard disk drive, which was useless. Anyway, unwrap the UVs because we need a unique UVs for working with Substance Painter. So what I'm doing now is I'm doing cube mapping, box mapping, there we go, so that we have each side on its own space on the UV map. Collapse that, yes, to a table poly. We're going to export that now again to the chamfer cube. Yes, correct version. We go to the Substance Painter. We start a new project. We are working in a normal map format DirectX. I think it was set to OpenGL by default. I'm not using auto unwrap, which is, by the way, a cool feature they added. So we're gonna use this chamfer cube now as a model. Just this one here. Click OK. And there you go. There is a cube. Here it is. So controls are very easy, like holding down Alt and left mouse button, you rotate your cube. Right mouse button, you zoom in. Just Alt and right mouse button, by the way. Just clicking the right mouse button brings up the standard brush parameters. It's like in Photoshop. Anyway, there are enough tutorials out how to handle the Substance Painter. And there is a good series by, meanwhile, Adobe on YouTube, where you have to create an armor crate or something like that. It's a series about 10 videos or 11 videos. You should definitely work through it, and you get so much tips and so much infos how to use a Substance Painter, and you get a king in less than a week. So anyway, this is the 2D texture view. This is the 3D view. I prefer to work with the just with the 3D view, and therefore I'm switching over to 3D mode only. When you start working with that guy, it's like you have different kind of channels, like in every other tool as well. For base color, metallic, roughness, normal maps, height maps, we have kind of a layer texture list. We have a layer-based system here as well. So you click here on layers, and you can draw inside of folders, create a layer in a folder, and draw and draw and draw, and multiply these layers and say where it should be shown, and blah. This is really cool stuff. This is the hottest shit, absolutely. So let's do some basic stuff, like we're gonna paint in first some simple patterns on it. This is like my workflow. Whenever I start with such things, I'm creating these hard surface stuff on the surfaces first, and then bake texture maps out of that. Like you see here, these mesh maps. There's a good reason for, because these hard surface texture materials or textures play a big role when it comes to baking also the ambient occlusion. So this creates a way more realistic look and feel, and this is what we are after. So let me have a look. I'm missing something. Where is my settings for my brush? Where did it want it to? Where's the brush panel? They changed that. Yes, I know. This is just the history. Yeah, I should have a look on the second screen by time. I'm sorry. And this is all hidden behind the webinar control panel. I'm sorry, here's everything. So let me bring that in here. Somewhere here. So here are my properties, and I wanted to draw now just the normal stuff onto a specific layer. So I need to clean up the space here a bit. This is the good thing when you have multiple monitors, you can scatter around all these panels. The very first layer, and I call this the normal layer. And I'm doing very, very, very simple stuff now. So properties of my painter, and I'm gonna put some textures on it. So something like that. Tailing that. No alpha, because I want to really stamp that on it. You see? So here I'm just stamping on some stuff. I have some vents, something like that. Here another one, and then we have a window. Changing the scale. So these there. And another vent, which goes on the other side of the cube. Huge like this. There's a reason why I'm doing that, because these things have real depth and stuff like that, and that makes creates cool effects when we are later working on with real procedural materials. So what I'm gonna do now is we have created real cube with real high details just on the normal areas, and what I'm gonna do now is using the bake mesh maps. Yeah, but the only thing we gonna export now, for now, or export textures now, is we gonna export the normal map only. So I've created a preset here which calls normal map only, and this uses the RGB channel and is mapped to the normal from DirectX. So what I'm selecting here is now my output template is normal map only. Let me find that one here, normal map only. The file type based on the template, I don't care right now. I just want to export that normal map now. So export, it creates the texture, which is 2K, it's fine. Open output directory, and there I have now on the right side my texture. So there we go. There's a chamfer cube default material normal map. You can also define how these prefixes and suffixes should look like. And what I'm doing now with this normal map is I simply drag and drop that texture here into Substance Design. He will ask me now for an optional prefix. I say this is a texture and where to import the resources to the project Untitled because it's saved. Okay, he automatically selects that one. And what I'm gonna do now is drag and drop that texture into the mesh maps slot called select normal map. There you go. It's now duplicate inside, and we disable the layer where I painted the normal map or the normal elements onto. You see, it's still applied now because we are using already a mesh map. And what I'm doing now is, now I'm baking my mesh maps, but I disable the normal because we have it already. I give it a fairly high detail, like 2K, and it will create now the world space normal, the ID, if you have IDs applied by a 3D tool, creating the ambient occlusion, the curvature, the position, and the thickness. So the ambient occlusion and the curvature maps are depending on an existing normal. And that's the reason why I exported in first the normal map and applied it on the mesh afterwards again. So I bake now the default material mesh maps by clicking here on this bake default material mesh maps. And it creates, and you see a preview in the background while this guy is now running. So it takes a while, baking the occlusion. Oh, it failed. I don't know why. Curvature and position, and the thickness is not ready. So open the log. Why did the internal error? Well, wow, okay. Maybe the support is not reachable right now and they have an internal error. I don't know why. Anyway, this should work. Okay, but if you have now a look at the curvature texture, for example, you can see that this curvature texture really contains these details for our from our normal map, and the same would go for the ambient occlusion map. So I'm selecting now the curvature map as ambient occlusion map. This is really not working, and this is kind of sad because most of the materials are based on ambient occlusion. I cannot really use the texture twice. What's going on here? Anyway, let's try to make it work. Then we have here on the left side in this so-called shelf, we have smart materials. And these smart materials rely on informations like the world space normal, the ambient occlusion map, the curvature, and so on and so on. And my preferred material, which you have seen already by the Ventuz robot I've created and textured, is this machinery material. There it comes from, this yellowish spot. Whenever I apply this now, you can see that this material has now a reason. It is smart because it knows and uses IDs and the world space normal, the position, to generate the texture for. So in this case, it knows this is the top, and on top there is a lot of dust. And that's the reason why we have now this dusty areas, this also very, very rough topping here, while the rest of the cube is really glossy. You can also barely spot these fingerprints here and stuff like that. Yeah. So the good thing is, whenever you are finished with creating and painting and stuff like that, you could create now another layer and add another fill layer, for example. So this layer will be filled with simple material like aluminium or something like that. So I drag and drop that onto aluminium pure. I'm gonna create now a black mask. And as soon as I paint on this black mask with white color, it will unleash the aluminium pure. And we can do this by using the particles, for example. And I'm using now these leaks or whatever else, and have this here. And you see these particles flowing around the shape of the normal map. That's why we need normal maps and curvature maps and stuff like that, because the particles are now corresponding to the to the surface, more or less. And that's what's really cool about this substance painter. So creating something like fire here, and this will create this pure aluminium areas. So we have now a mixture about a painted object and non-conductive, which I introduced in the material editor basic workshop, and a conductive area. So we want to export this guy now, and like I said already, this is really cool that we can now use GLTF PBR metal roughness as an output template, because this makes it possible to quickly export that stuff out. It will now create all the textures and stuff like that here. And we have an GLB file, which is a binary, and we have an GLTF, which is just the object referring to these maps we have here. And what I'm gonna do now is switch over to Ventuz. There we go. I have just the sky here. And I'm gonna drag and drop the GLB file in here. Oop, there we go. And this guy is so big. There we go. So let me have a look. There we have the metallic surface. The rest is usually the painted one. And this is because I have no light here. Is it right? Sky. Take the sky. Okay, I did a small mistake. And you see the roughness is applied and stuff like that, but the color is not working because of the light. I'm pretty sure that's the reason. No, it's not. I have to check that. There is something wrong. No. Anyway, I have to check that one. That's kind of strange. Okay. So, but you see, it's really easy to get these things out of the substance painter, including the correct values and correct textures. And then by dragging and dropping that into the Ventuz with the correct working one, this is really easy to get the materials and the meshes together into Ventuz. And you see it has all the correct values except the color. Like here, the dusty areas, we have the fingerprint or the dirty painted surfaces, we have the metallic elements, we have everything. Sorry, we have all the correct stuff now imported in Ventuz. So far, so good. I took enough of your time right now. If you have questions, just drop them in now. I will be happy to answer them, as well as a colleague of mine is already doing that aside, as I've seen. Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah. Any more questions? Because my colleague did answer them already, all of them, which being related to, well, small things, which is not of interest for the public, to be honestly. So yeah, if you don't have any more questions right now, it's okay. If you have upcoming questions, drop us a line either into the forums or use Discord, or write a mail at support@ventuz.com, and we are happy to help you out there. My name was Dennis, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar and you had some useful informations, maybe some stuff you didn't know about or something like that. We have several webinars coming up. I already posted a schedule of the webinars, upcoming webinars, and also the Tuesday talks, which are held by Roy, into the forums. They are subject to change, by the way, so maybe that we have another guest or some guys are changing them. I try to keep you updated with that list. I hope you enjoyed that, and I wish you a great day. And please do me a favor, stay safe